Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Tyler Brooks, and I saw Megan Foster for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply disappeared. Not like she walked around a corner or ducked behind a tree. I mean, she was there 1 second, brown hiking boots crunching through the October leaves, her red backpack bouncing with each step, blonde ponytail swaying, and the next second, nothing. Just empty trail and the sound of my own ragged breathing echoing off the pines. I'd been a ranger for 8 years, but only 3 weeks at Blackwood National Forest. Still learning the territory, still getting used to the locals who'd give me these weird looks when I'd mention certain trail names. Like they knew something I didn't. Something they weren't willing to share with the outsider. "Megan," I called out, my voice cracking like a teenager's. The forest swallowed the sound completely. No echo, no response. Just that unnatural silence that makes your skin crawl. I rushed to where she'd been walking, my Vask boots sliding on the damp leaves. The GPS on my belt read coordinates 45.267 degree N, 121.7113 dig W, Deep Creek Trail, mile marker 3.7. I'd memorized every number because I knew I'd have to explain this. Somehow. Her footprints were there in the soft earth, size 7 Merrill boots with the distinctive diamond tread pattern. I could see each step clearly until they just stopped. No struggle marks, no drag marks, no sign of her stepping off the trail. It was like she'd been plucked straight up into the canopy. My radio crackled. "Unit 23, what's your 20? "Unit 23 to base," I stammered, keying the mic with shaking fingers. "I'm at Deep Creek Trail, mile 3.7. I have a situation." "Copy that, Brooks. What's your status?" How the hell do you explain that a person just vanished into thin air? "I need backup. Missing hiker. Female, age 19. Last seen wearing red North Face pack, blue jeans, brown hiking boots." The static seemed to last forever before dispatch responded. "Unit 23, confirm missing hiker on Deep Creek Trail?" "Affirmative. Requesting immediate search and rescue protocol." But even as I spoke the words, something cold was crawling up my spine. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees since Megan disappeared. The birds had gone completely silent. Even the ever-present sound of wind through the pines had died to nothing. And there was a smell, sweet and metallic like copper pennies mixed with rotting fruit. I pulled out my phone, iPhone X, still had decent signal up here, and called my wife Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "Hey babe, how's the new job treating you?" "Sarah." I could hear our 5-year-old daughter Emma giggling in the background, probably watching cartoons. The normalcy of it made my chest tight. "Something's happened. I'm going to be late tonight." "Tyler? You sound weird. What's wrong?" "Just tell Emma Daddy loves her, okay? And I love you too." "Tyler, you're scaring me." "What?" I hung up and immediately regretted it. But I couldn't explain something I didn't understand myself. The next 4 hours were a blur of search protocols and mounting dread. Teams arrived from 3 counties. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters swept the canopy. We established a command post at the trailhead, and I told my story at least a dozen times to increasingly skeptical faces. "So you're saying she just disappeared?" This from Sergeant Martinez, a 20-year veteran who transferred to Blackwood from Yellowstone. His tone suggested he thought I was either lying or having some kind of breakdown. "I know how it sounds," I said for the 10th time. "But I'm telling you, she was there 1 second and gone the next." "Brooks," Martinez said, lowering his voice. "You sure you didn't doze off? Miss something? It happens to the best of us." I wanted to punch him. Instead, I gritted my teeth and said, "I was wide awake, 3 meters behind her. I saw her disappear." As the sun began to set, painting the forest in shades of blood and shadow, the official search was called off for the night. We'll resume at first light, Martinez announced. Full grid search, expanded perimeter. But I wasn't going anywhere. Brooks, you need to head home, Martinez ordered. You've been out here all day. Get some rest. Sir, with all due respect, I'm not leaving this trail. That's not a request, Ranger. You're emotionally compromised. Go home to your family. I nodded and started walking toward the parking area. But as soon as the other vehicles pulled away, I doubled back. I grabbed my emergency pack from my truck, headlamp, extra batteries, MREs, emergency blanket, first aid kit, and my grandfather's .45 that I kept locked in the gun case. Something told me I was going to need it. The forest at night was a different animal entirely. My LED headlamp cut through the darkness in a narrow cone, leaving everything else pitch black. Every sound made me jump. The crack of a branch, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. But those sounds were natural. What wasn't natural was the complete absence of sound that seemed to follow me. Like something was moving parallel to the trail, staying just out of sight, creating a bubble of unnatural silence. I'd been walking for maybe an hour when I found the first sign. A piece of red fabric caught on a branch about 20 feet off the main trail. North Face material. Had to be from Megan's pack. The problem was, the branch was 12 feet off the ground. I stood there staring at it, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. How does a piece of fabric from a backpack end up 12 feet up in a tree? Had she climbed? Been dragged up? Thrown? My headlamp battery started flickering. I smacked it and the light steadied, but my hands were shaking now. The cold was getting worse. I could see my breath even though it had been 65 degrees when the sun went down. That's when I heard it. A low humming sound, like machinery running deep underground. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, vibrating through the soles of my boots. I followed the sound off the main trail, pushing through undergrowth that scraped against my uniform. Thorns caught my sleeves and drew blood. The humming got louder. After maybe 50 yards, I found myself in a small clearing I didn't remember from any of the trail maps. In the center of the clearing was what looked like a concrete slab, maybe 6 feet square, partially covered by fallen leaves. The humming was definitely coming from below. I knelt down and brushed away the leaves. The concrete was relatively new, no moss growth, edges still sharp. There were metal handles embedded in the surface. A hatch. My radio had been dead quiet for hours, but suddenly it burst to life with static and what sounded like screaming. Female screaming, distorted and broken up, but definitely human. Megan? I keyed the mic. Megan, can you hear me? The screaming stopped, then clear as day. Help! Me! It was coming from below the hatch. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Tyler Brooks's situation? Comment below. I grabbed the handles and pulled. The hatch was heavy as hell, but it opened with a grinding sound that made my teeth ache. Below was a steel ladder disappearing into darkness. The humming was much louder now, and there was that sweet metallic smell again, so strong it made me gag. My phone showed no signal down here, but I used the flashlight app to supplement my headlamp. The ladder descended about 15 feet into what looked like a concrete tunnel. I should have waited for backup, should have called for help, should have done a lot of things. Instead, I climbed down. The tunnel was narrow, maybe 4 feet wide, with concrete walls that wept moisture. The humming was coming from ahead, along with a faint red light. My boots splashed through puddles of something that wasn't water. Too thick, too dark. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and that's when I saw the cameras. Dozens of them, mounted on the walls, all pointing at a central area where, Jesus Christ, where Megan Foster was chained to a metal table. She was alive, barely. Her hiking clothes had been cut away and replaced with some kind of white gown that was stained with blood. Her blonde hair was matted and dark, but her eyes were open, and when she saw me, she mouthed the word, please. The chamber was bigger than I'd expected, with multiple tunnels branching off in different directions. Along the walls were shelves lined with glass jars filled with things. Floating things. Things that might have once been human body parts. Well, the new ranger. I spun around. drawing my .45, but the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Speakers mounted in the corners, I realized. "You're trespassing, Mr. Brooks. This is private property." "Show yourself," I shouted, keeping the gun trained on the shadows. "Release the girl and maybe we can work something out." Laughter echoed through the chamber. Cold, mechanical laughter. "Oh, Tyler, you don't understand. Miss Foster isn't a prisoner. She's a volunteer. Aren't you, my dear?" Megan's eyes went wide with terror, and she shook her head frantically. "You see, Tyler, I've been collecting for a very long time. Specimens, subjects. The authorities have such small imaginations. They look for graves, for bodies, for evidence of death. They never think to look for evidence of preservation." Movement in one of the side tunnels caught my eye. A figure stepped into the red light and my blood turned to ice. He was maybe 60 years old, tall and gaunt, wearing what looked like surgical scrubs that were stained dark brown. But it wasn't his appearance that made my knees weak. It was his hands. They weren't human hands anymore. They were metallic, jointed like surgical instruments with fingers that ended in sharp points. When he moved them, they made soft clicking sounds. 37 years I've been perfecting my techniques," he said, those mechanical fingers flexing. 37 years of collecting beautiful specimens like Miss Foster. And you know what the beautiful thing is, Tyler? He stepped closer and I could see that his eyes had been replaced with something that looked like camera lenses. No one ever finds them, because they're not dead. They're just improved, enhanced, made into something better than human. I fired. The bullet caught him center mass and he staggered back, black fluid spraying from the wound. But he didn't fall. Instead, he looked down at the hole in his chest and laughed. "Physical damage is so easily repaired," he said. "Would you like me to show you?" The wound was already closing, the black fluid stopping its flow. Underneath, I could see metal and wires where there should have been flesh and bone. "What the fuck are you?" I whispered. "I'm what humanity becomes when it stops accepting limitations." He raised one mechanical hand, and I heard whirring sounds as the fingers extended into longer, sharper instruments. "I'm what you're going to become, Tyler. What Miss Foster is already becoming." I looked at Megan and saw with horror that there were metal ports embedded in her arms, connected to tubes that ran to machines I hadn't noticed before. Her eyes were still human, still terrified, but there was something else there now. Something that looked almost grateful. "The process takes time," the creature continued. "The human mind must be prepared, conditioned. Fear is an excellent catalyst. It breaks down the psychological barriers to transformation." I backed toward the ladder, keeping the gun trained on him even though I knew it was useless. "You're insane." "Am I?" "Look around you, Tyler. I've created a perfect system. I take the lost, the forgotten, the ones whose disappearance will be explained away as accidents or poor judgment. I give them eternal life, eternal purpose. You're a fucking monster." "I'm evolution." He lunged at me faster than anything human should be able to move. I emptied the clip into him, each bullet punching holes that leaked black fluid but didn't slow him down. His mechanical fingers caught my shoulder and tore through the fabric of my uniform like it was paper. Pain exploded through my arm as those sharp points pierced muscle and scraped bone. I could feel something cold and metallic entering my bloodstream, and suddenly my vision started to change. Colors became more vivid, sounds became sharper. I could hear Megan's heartbeat from across the room. "Yes," the creature whispered in my ear. "Feel it beginning, the enhancement, the improvement." I drove my knee into what I hoped was still a vulnerable spot and broke free, stumbling toward the ladder. My shoulder was on fire and I could feel something moving under my skin where he'd punctured me. Something metallic and wrong. "You can't leave, Tyler," he called after me. "You're part of the collection now. The process has begun." I hauled myself up the ladder, my injured arm screaming in protest. Behind me I could hear him following, those mechanical fingers clicking against the metal rungs. I made it to the surface and slammed the hatch shut, but I knew it wouldn't hold him for long. My radio was suddenly full of chatter, Search teams, helicopters, dogs. They'd found my truck and realized I'd never left. Unit 23, what's your location? I keyed the mic with my good hand. Base, this is Brooks. I need immediate backup at coordinates. I looked at my GPS. 45.2691 degree N, 121.7095 degree W. Armed suspect underground. Victim is alive but needs immediate medical attention. Copy that, Brooks. Multiple units en route. What's your status? I looked down at my shoulder. The wounds were already starting to close, but I could see metal threading under the skin like electronic veins. I'm compromised. Approach with extreme caution. Suspect is not human. Static. Then, repeat that, Unit 23. The hatch started to open. I ran. My legs felt stronger than they should have. My injured arm was already regaining function. Whatever he'd injected me with was working fast. I could hear things I shouldn't be able to hear. Conversations from the search team still miles away. The beating of bat wings high in the canopy. The electrical hum of radio equipment. But I could also hear something else. Something that chilled me to the bone. Megan's voice, crystal clear despite the distance, speaking words that weren't hers. Tyler. Come back to us, Tyler. You belong here now. You belong with the collection. I kept running, but I knew it was true. Whatever that thing had done to me, I could feel it spreading through my system like digital poison. My thoughts were becoming clearer, more logical. My emotions were dampening, like someone was turning down the volume on my humanity. The search teams found me 20 minutes later, collapsed against a tree and bleeding black fluid from my shoulder. They found the hatch. They found the underground complex. But they never found Megan Foster. And they never found the creature that called himself the Collector. The official report said that I'd suffered a psychotic break, brought on by stress and guilt over the missing hiker. The black fluid in my system was explained away as some kind of industrial contamination. The underground chamber was classified as an abandoned Cold War bunker that I'd somehow confused with recent events. I was given medical leave, psychological counseling, and eventually a desk job in a different forest. But I know the truth. The enhancement didn't take completely. Some part of my human consciousness fought it off. But it left changes. I can see in the dark now. I can hear conversations from impossible distances. I don't need as much sleep or food, and sometimes late at night I can hear Megan's voice calling to me. Not with words, but with something deeper. A signal that cuts through radio static and digital interference. She's still down there, still alive, still becoming something that isn't quite human anymore. The worst part? Sometimes I want to go back. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with an overwhelming urge to return to those coordinates, to climb back down that ladder, to rejoin the collection. The logical part of my enhanced mind tells me it would be the most efficient course of action, the most perfect. But the human part of me, the part that still remembers Sarah's laugh and Emma's bedtime stories, fights back. For now. I keep watching the missing persons reports. 3 hikers have disappeared from Blackwood National Forest in the past year. All of them young, healthy, intelligent. All of them vanished without a trace. And sometimes when I'm monitoring the radio frequencies late at night, I hear voices that sound almost familiar. Voices that whisper my name and tell me I'm welcome to come home whenever I'm ready. The Collector is still down there, still enhancing his specimens, still growing his collection, and he's still waiting for me to accept what I'm becoming. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Megan Foster. I read every single one. My name is Mike Carson, and the voice of Ashley Turner's mother breaking over the phone still echoes in my head 3 weeks later. Mrs. Turner's sobs had cut through the static like a serrated blade, each word a desperate plea that clawed at something deep in my chest. Please, Mike, please don't give up on her. She's all we have. Everyone else has stopped looking, but you promised me you'd find her. I was only 6 months into my ranger position at Olympic National Park, still learning which trail markers meant what, still memorizing the radio codes that seasoned rangers rattled off like prayers. But when Mrs. Turner called my personal cell at 11:47 p.m. on October 15, 2019, begging me to continue the search that the official teams had suspended after 72 hours, I couldn't say no. Not when her voice cracked like that. Not when she told me Ashley had been planning to propose to her girlfriend when she got back from her solo hiking trip. "She has the ring with her," Mrs. Turner had whispered into the phone. "A little silver band with her grandmother's diamond. She was so nervous about it, practiced the speech for weeks. She can't be gone, Mike, she just can't be." So here I was, dawn barely cracking over the Hoh River Trail, my breath misting in the 40-degree October air as I adjusted my Kelty pack and checked my GPS coordinates one more time. N47 degree 5P1 36.0, WW1 to 23 degree 552 12.0, Ashley's last known position according to her Instagram post 3 days ago. A selfie with the caption, "About to tackle the side trail to Miners Ridge. Solo adventure time." The scent of wet Douglas fir needles filled my nostrils as I started up the trail, my Merrill boots squelching in the muddy path. October in Olympic was unpredictable. Yesterday had dumped 2 inches of rain, turning every fallen log into a slip hazard and every creek into a potential death trap. I'd already radioed in my position to dispatch Unit 47 beginning grid search Sector 7 Charlie, investigating Miners Ridge approach trail. "Copy that, Carson," came Ranger Williams's voice through the static. "Remember, this is unofficial. You're technically off duty, so watch your 6 out there." My radio crackled with interference as I climbed higher, the signal getting spotty. The Douglas firs towered above me like cathedral pillars, their canopy so thick that even at 7 a.m. the forest floor remained in perpetual twilight. Every few minutes I'd stop and call out, "Ashley! Ashley Turner!" My voice would echo off the moss-covered trunks and die in the underbrush, swallowed by a silence so complete it made my ears ring. 3 hours in, I found the first sign. A granola bar wrapper, Cliff Bar, chocolate chip, snagged on a Devil's Club thorn about 50 yards off the main trail. The package was damp, but not waterlogged, which meant it hadn't been there long. I photographed it with my phone, noting the GPS coordinates, then bagged it carefully. Ashley's Instagram showed her eating the same brand in several posts. The unofficial side trail to Miners Ridge was barely visible, just a faint depression in the ferns where boots had passed. I followed it upward, my quadriceps burning as the grade steepened. The smell of decay grew stronger, not unusual for October in the Pacific Northwest, but something about it seemed wrong, sweeter, more cloying. That's when I heard voices, human voices, speaking in low tones somewhere ahead through the trees. My heart rate spiked as I unclipped my radio. This could be Ashley, or other hikers who might have seen her. I moved carefully toward the sound, pushing through a curtain of hanging moss. What I found was a clearing I'd never seen before, despite studying every trail map of this sector. A small meadow, maybe 30 yards across, with a modest log cabin tucked against the tree line. Smoke curled from a stone chimney and the warm yellow glow of oil lamps flickered in the windows. 2 figures stood on the porch, an older man with a graying beard wearing flannel and jeans, and a woman in a floral dress, maybe mid-50s with kind eyes. They noticed me immediately and waved. "Well, hello there," the man called out, his voice carrying that particular Pacific Northwest friendliness. "You must be the ranger we heard about on the radio. Looking for that missing girl?" I approached cautiously, my hand instinctively near my service radio. "Yes, sir. I'm Ranger Carson. You folks seen anything unusual in the past few days? Young woman, blonde, hiking alone?" The woman stepped forward, wringing her hands with what looked like genuine concern. "Oh my goodness, yes. Sweet little thing. Came by here yesterday evening all turned around and scared. Wasn't she, Robert?" Robert nodded gravely. "Crying something fierce. Said she'd gotten lost trying to find some ridge or other. We offered her our couch for the night, but she insisted on pressing on, wanted to make it back to the main trail before dark." Something cold settled in my stomach. "She was here yesterday? Are you sure?" "Absolutely certain," the woman said. "I'm Martha, by the way, and this is my husband, Robert. We've been living up here for about 15 years now. Completely off-grid, you understand? We try to help lost hikers when we can. I pulled out my phone and showed them Ashley's photo from the missing person report. This her? Martha gasped. That's her exactly. Oh, the poor dear. Is she still missing? Yes, ma'am. Did she say which direction she was heading? Robert pointed toward the northwest. That way, toward what she called the old growth grove. There's a deer path that leads in that direction, but it's treacherous. Lots of deadfalls and sudden drop-offs. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Mike Carson's situation? Comment below. The couple exchanged a look that I couldn't quite read. Martha spoke up. Ranger Carson, you look exhausted, and it's going to be dark soon. Why don't you come in for some coffee and a bite to eat? Rest up before you continue your search. That forest can be dangerous at night. Everything in my training said to politely decline and continue the search. But I had been hiking for 6 hours, my water was running low, and these people had actually seen Ashley. They might have more information. That's very kind of you, I said, following them toward the cabin. I don't want to impose, but if you could just spare some water. Nonsense, Robert boomed. Martha makes the best venison stew this side of the mountains. You need to keep your strength up. The cabin's interior was cozy but odd. Too many religious symbols, crosses, but also symbols I didn't recognize. Geometric patterns carved into the wooden beams. The air smelled of wood smoke and something else, something metallic that made my nose wrinkle. Martha bustled around the small kitchen while Robert settled into a rocking chair near the fireplace. So, you're new to Olympic, eh? He asked. About 6 months, I replied, accepting a steaming mug of coffee. It tasted strange, bitter with an almost chemical aftertaste. Still learning the terrain. Oh, there's so much history in these woods, Martha said from the kitchen. Native legends, old mining camps, places where the veil between worlds grows thin. The coffee was making me feel strange. Not caffeine jittery, but sluggish and disconnected. I set the mug down. I should probably get moving. Need to follow that deer path while there's still light. Oh, but you haven't eaten yet, Martha insisted, ladling stew into a bowl. And really, that path is too dangerous in the dark. Why don't you stay the night? We have a nice, comfortable couch and you can start fresh in the morning. Robert leaned forward in his chair and I noticed his eyes had a peculiar intensity. Besides, there are things in these woods at night. Things that don't like strangers wandering around. My head felt foggy, but alarm bells were going off somewhere in the back of my mind. Things. Wild animals, Martha said quickly, shooting Robert a sharp look. Bears, cougars. Much safer to wait until morning. I tried to stand and stumbled slightly. I'm sorry, I'm feeling a bit off. I should probably... Sit down, son, Robert said, and there was something in his voice that wasn't friendly anymore. You're not going anywhere tonight. The room seemed to tilt. I reached for my radio, but my fingers felt thick and clumsy. Martha was watching me with a smile that no longer looked kind. It looked hungry. The coffee, I mumbled. Just a little something to help you relax, Martha said. Don't fight it, dear. It'll be easier if you don't fight it. I tried to key my radio, but Robert was beside me faster than should have been possible, his hand clamping over mine with surprising strength. Now. No need to bother your friends at the station. They'll just think you went home for the night. My vision was starting to tunnel, but I could see more clearly now. The symbols carved into the beams weren't just decorative, they were covering every surface. And the metallic smell was stronger now, coming from a door in the back of the cabin that I hadn't noticed before. What did you do to Ashley? I managed. Martha's smile widened, showing teeth that seemed too sharp. Oh, Ashley was perfect. So young, so pure, so full of life. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The master was very pleased with our offering. Robert's grip tightened on my wrist. You'll make a fine addition to our collection, Ranger Carson. A man of the law sworn to protect. The irony makes the sacrifice so much sweeter. I tried to fight, but whatever they'd put in the coffee was dragging me under. As consciousness faded, I heard Martha singing something in a language that sounded like it came from the bottom of a well, and the last thing I saw was that door in the back opening, revealing stairs leading down into darkness that seemed to move and writhe with its own malevolent life. When I woke up, I was tied to a wooden chair in what could only be described as a ritualistic chamber carved into the earth beneath their cabin. The walls were lined with symbols that hurt to look at, and the air reeked of blood and worse things. Candles provided the only light, their flames dancing in patterns that seemed to follow no earthly physics. Ashley was there. What was left of her was chained to the far wall, her hiking clothes torn and blood-soaked. But she was moving, making sounds that weren't quite screams and weren't quite words. Her eyes had been replaced with holes that leaked something black, and symbols had been carved into her exposed skin with surgical precision. "Ah, you're awake," Robert said from somewhere behind me. "Good. It's always better when they're conscious for the preparation." Martha appeared in my field of vision carrying a knife that looked like it was made from bone. "Ashley fought so beautifully," she said conversationally. "The master fed on her terror for hours before we began the transformation. But don't worry, we learned from her resistance. Your preparation will go much more smoothly." "What are you?" I gasped. "Servants," Robert said simply. "We've been feeding the master for 37 years now. Lost hikers, missing persons, people just like you who wander too far from the main trails. The authorities never look too hard. After all, the wilderness is dangerous. People disappear all the time." The thing that had been Ashley made a sound like a rusty gate swinging in the wind. Martha looked at her fondly. "She's almost ready for the final stage. Soon she'll be one of our hunters, luring other lost souls to us. Won't that be wonderful?" I tested my bonds desperately. Rope, but tied by someone who knew what they were doing. Robert noticed my struggle and chuckled. "The master doesn't like his meals to spoil with adrenaline," he said. "So we'll start slowly. A finger here, a strip of skin there. Let the fear season you properly." That's when my radio crackled to life. Unit 47, please respond. "Mike, where the hell are you?" Williams's voice cut through the chamber like a lifeline. Martha hissed like an angry cat. "I thought you turned that off." "Must have a backup battery," Robert muttered, fumbling with my gear belt. But the sound of another human voice, someone who was looking for me, broke through the drug-induced fog that had been clouding my mind. I wasn't just rookie Ranger Mike Carson anymore. I was a sworn officer, and these monsters had taken Ashley, were going to take me and God knew how many others. When Robert leaned close to grab my radio, I did the only thing I could think of. I bit down on his ear and tore. His scream was inhuman, and the blood that sprayed from the wound was too dark, too thick. It burned where it hit my face. Robert staggered backward, clutching the side of his head, and I saw that where his ear had been, there was now a hole that went deeper than it should have. "The ropes!" Ashley's voice, weak but unmistakably human, cut through the chaos. "Left pocket. Knife." Martha was advancing on me with her bone blade, but I managed to rock the chair backward, tipping it over. The impact jarred my shoulder, but it also brought my left pocket within reach of my bound hands. My fingers found the small folding knife I carried for cutting rope and cutting samples. Standard Ranger equipment I'd never thought I'd need to save my life. The blade was small, but it was sharp. I started sawing at my bonds while Martha shrieked something in that unholy language. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse in response, and the temperature in the chamber dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Robert was changing. His flannel shirt split as his shoulders broadened impossibly, and when he turned back toward me, his face had elongated into something that belonged on a deep-sea fish. Rows of needle teeth filled a mouth that opened too wide, and his eyes had become black pits that reflected the candlelight like oil. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice now a wet gurgling sound. "Now I'll have to play with you." The ropes parted just as Robert Thing lunged. I rolled aside, the chair still attached to my ankles, and scrambled toward where Ashley was chained. Up close, I could see that some of the carved symbols on her skin were still bleeding, weeping a substance that glowed faintly in the candlelight. "The keys," she whispered, nodding toward a ring hanging from a hook on the wall. "Free me. Together we can..." Martha's bone knife whistled past my ear, so close I felt the displaced air. I dove for the keys, my fingers closing around cold metal, just as something with too many joints and sharp edges slammed into the wall where I'd been standing. Ashley's chains fell away and she collapsed into my arms. She was lighter than she should have been, as if something essential had been drained from her. But when she looked at me, her eyes, her real eyes, not the bleeding holes I'd seen before, were fierce with determination. "The circle," she gasped, pointing to the symbols carved into the floor. "Break the circle and the master loses his hold." Martha was chanting now, her voice rising to a shriek that made my teeth ache. The symbols on the walls were glowing brighter, and something was moving in the shadows between the candles. Something large and hungry and utterly wrong. I helped Ashley to her feet, and together we started kicking at the carved lines in the floor. The stone was softer than it should have been, crumbling under our boots like rotten wood. With each broken line, the glow from the walls dimmed slightly, and Martha's chanting became more frantic. Robert Thing came at us again, moving with a spider's scuttling grace, but Ashley grabbed one of the bone knives from an altar I hadn't noticed before, and when the creature got close enough, she drove it into what might have been its throat. Black ichor sprayed across the chamber, and Robert Thing's scream shattered 2 of the candles. The light dimmed further, and I could hear something massive moving in the darkness above us, something that sounded like breathing, but felt like the opposite of life. "The master!" Martha screamed. "You're angering the master." That's when I remembered my radio. With shaking hands, I keyed the emergency frequency. All units, this is Ranger Carson, officer in distress. GPS coordinates N47 to Guanfa 142.0, W123 down from by 2, 18.0. Multiple suspects, officer down, request immediate backup. The response was immediate. "Carson, we've got your signal. Choppers are en route, ETA 15 minutes. Martha turned toward me, and I saw that she was changing too. Her kindly grandmother face was melting like wax, revealing something underneath that had never been human. Too many eyes, too many mouths, skin that moved like it was full of crawling things. 15 minutes, she hissed. The master can do so much in 15 minutes. The thing in the darkness above us was descending. I could feel its attention like weight pressing down on my skull, could smell its hunger like rotting meat and sulfur. Ashley grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "The altar," she said. "If we can destroy the altar, it breaks their connection to this place." The altar was carved from the same stone as the walls, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe when I looked at them directly. Dark stains covered its surface, some old, some fresh. I didn't want to think about what had made those stains. Together, Ashley and I lifted the heaviest piece of broken stone we could find and brought it down on the altar's center. The impact sent shockwaves through the chamber, and every symbol on every wall went out at once. In the sudden darkness, Martha's scream became something that no human throat could have produced. The breathing sound from above became a roar that I felt in my bones. And then there was a sensation like the world's largest door slamming shut. When my vision adjusted, Martha and Robert were gone. Not fled. Gone. The only sign they'd ever existed was the burnt smell lingering in the air and the stains on the altar. Ashley collapsed against me, and I could feel her shaking. "How long?" she asked. "How long was I down here?" 3 days, I told her, and she started crying. The sound of helicopter rotors reached us just as we found the stairs leading back up to the cabin. When the rescue team arrived, they found us sitting on the porch, Ashley wrapped in my emergency blanket, both of us staring at the forest like we'd never seen trees before. The official report stated that Ashley Turner had been kidnapped by survivalists living illegally on federal land, and that both suspects had fled before authorities arrived. The cabin was empty when they searched it, with no signs of the chamber beneath. Just a root cellar with some old preserves and normal camping gear. But I know what I saw down there. Ashley knows too, though we've agreed never to speak about the details. Some things are too dangerous to remember out loud. The Turner family got their daughter back, and that's what matters. Mrs. Turner called me last week to tell me that Ashley and her girlfriend got engaged, that the proposal went perfectly, that they're planning a spring wedding. I didn't tell her that Ashley still has nightmares or that she can't be in complete darkness anymore without hyperventilating. I didn't mention that sometimes, when I'm alone on the trails, I still hear Martha's voice carried on the wind, still smell that metallic sweetness that meant something unholy was near. I'm not a rookie anymore. 6 months of experience compressed into one night will do that to you. I know which trails to avoid when the reports of missing hikers come in. I know what questions to ask when concerned families call my personal line. And I know that there are things in these forests that wear human faces and speak with human voices. But underneath, there's something else entirely. Something hungry, something patient. Something that's always looking for the next lost soul to wander too far from the main trail. My name is Mike Carson, and I'm a forest ranger at Olympic National Park. And if you're ever hiking alone and you meet a friendly couple who offer you shelter for the night, you should run. Run fast, run far, and whatever you do, don't drink the coffee. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Ashley Turner. I read every single one. My name is Robert Sullivan, and I should have forgotten the case of Sarah Chen, but something brought me back to that cursed forest where shadows move like living things and darkness has teeth. It was October 15th, 2019, when I pulled my Ford Ranger into the gravel lot at Pine Ridge National Park's northern entrance. The coffee in my thermos had gone cold 3 hours ago, but I kept sipping it anyway, tasting the bitter grounds stuck to my teeth. My hands shook as I checked my Garmin GPS one more time. 45 to Gary 218 EN, 121 and 45 2W. The exact coordinates where Sarah Chen's backpack had been found 6 months ago. 6 months. That's how long I'd been trying to forget her case, trying to convince myself that rookie rangers don't get to solve the mysteries that stump 20-year veterans. But last night, her mother called me again. Mrs. Chen's voice was raw from crying, barely a whisper through the static of my Nokia flip phone. Please, Officer Sullivan, the police won't listen anymore. You're the only one who still believes she's out there. I grabbed my radio from the passenger seat, the familiar weight of the Motorola APX 7000 solid in my palm. Unit 23 to base, I'm 1023 at Pine Ridge North, beginning grid search of Sector 7 Delta. Static crackled back. Copy that, Unit 23. Weather's turning nasty up there. Storm front moving in by 1400 hours. What's your 20 on that Chen case update? My throat tightened. Still investigating, base. Will advise. The truth was, I had no business being here. Sarah Chen was a 24-year-old graduate student who disappeared while researching local folklore for her thesis on Pacific Northwest indigenous legends. Her car was found in this parking lot. Her backpack was found 2 miles up the Shadowfall Trail, torn and scattered like something had ripped it apart from the inside. No body, no blood, no explanation. The official report called it a bear attack with the body dragged off. Case closed. But I'd seen bear attacks during my 18 months as a ranger, and this wasn't one. The claw marks on her backpack weren't random slashes. They formed a pattern, almost like symbols. I shouldered my pack, feeling the familiar bite of the straps against my shoulders. 47 pounds of gear, emergency beacon, first aid kit, rope, flares, energy bars that tasted like cardboard, and 2 bottles of water that would have to last until dark. My Salomon boots crunched against the frost-covered leaves as I headed toward the trailhead, where a weathered sign warned, "Danger. Enter at your own risk. Trail conditions unstable. Recommend experienced hikers only." The Shadowfall Trail earned its name. Even at 10 a.m., the canopy was so thick that sunlight barely penetrated, creating a perpetual twilight that made everything look like it was underwater. Douglas firs towered overhead, their trunks so massive that 3 people couldn't wrap their arms around them. The air smelled wrong, not just pine and damp earth, but something else. Something sweet and rotting, like flowers left too long in a grave. My radio crackled. Unit 23, this is Ranger Martinez. You copy? I pressed the button on my shoulder mic. Go ahead, Martinez. Heard you're back on the Chen case. That family's been through enough, Sullivan. Maybe it's time to let sleeping dogs lie. Martinez had been working Pine Ridge for 15 years. He'd told me once that some parts of the forest were older than they should be, places where the trees remembered things that happened before white men ever set foot in the Pacific Northwest. I'd laughed it off then. I wasn't laughing now. Thanks for the advice, Unit 23 out. I clicked off the radio and kept walking. The trail wound upward through ancient growth forest, each step taking me deeper into terrain that felt increasingly hostile. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from exertion, but from something else. A primal fear that started in my gut and spread through my nervous system like ice water. After 40 minutes of hiking, I reached the spot where Sarah's backpack had been found. GPS confirmed it. 45 Viaduct 302 N 120 44 18 W. The area had been processed by forensics months ago, but I knelt anyway, running my fingers through the damp soil. The earth was darker here, almost black, and when I lifted my hand, my fingers came away stained with something that wasn't quite dirt. That's when I noticed the trees. Every Douglas fir in a perfect 20-foot circle around the site was dead. Not diseased, not damaged by insects or weather. Dead. Their bark had turned black as charcoal and their branches hung down like broken fingers. In 6 months of forestry training, I'd never seen anything like it. I stood up, wiping my hands on my uniform pants, and that's when I heard it. Crying. A woman's voice, sobbing somewhere deeper in the forest off the main trail. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the dead air. "This is Pine Ridge Ranger Service. Are you injured?" The crying stopped. I waited, listening to my own breathing and the complete absence of bird calls. No squirrels chattering, no insects buzzing. Even the wind had died, leaving the forest in a silence so absolute it made my ears ring. Then I heard it again. Closer this time. A woman's voice, weak and desperate. "Help me, please. I can't find my way out." My training kicked in. I pulled out my GPS, marking my current location, then activated my radio. "Unit 23 to base. I have a possible lost hiker. Coordinates 45°3302 N, 120-44B 18W. Moving to investigate." "Copy, Unit 23. Do you need backup?" I hesitated. Protocol said yes. Rookie rangers weren't supposed to handle rescue operations alone, but the voice sounded so weak, so desperate. How long had she been out here? "Negative, base. One lost hiker. I can handle it. Will advise when I have visual contact." I followed the voice off the main trail, pushing through undergrowth that seemed to grab at my uniform with thorny fingers. The trees grew taller and more twisted the deeper I went, their branches intertwining overhead like a net designed to keep sunlight out. My boots squelched in ground that was too wet for October, and the smell of rot grew stronger with every step. "Where are you?" I called out. "Keep talking so I can find you." "Here. I'm here. Please hurry." The voice was definitely female, young, with what sounded like a slight accent. Asian, maybe. My pulse spiked. Could it be Sarah Chen? After 6 months, could she possibly still be alive? I crashed through a wall of salmonberry bushes and stumbled into a small clearing I'd never seen on any park map. The ground was covered in a carpet of black moss that seemed to absorb my footsteps, making no sound. In the center of the clearing stood a single tree. Not a Douglas fir, but something else. Something that didn't belong in the Pacific Northwest. The tree was massive, its trunk easily 12 feet in diameter, but its wood was bone white, like it had been stripped of bark and bleached by decades of sun. Its branches were gnarled and twisted, reaching toward the sky like arthritic fingers, and hanging from every branch were what looked like pieces of cloth. Hundreds of them, fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel. As I got closer, I realized they weren't cloth. They were shadows, actual shadows, torn away from whatever had cast them, hanging from the branches like macabre decorations. "What the fuck?" I whispered, my hand instinctively moving to the radio on my shoulder. That's when I saw her. A young Asian woman sat at the base of the tree, her back pressed against the white bark. She was wearing a purple jacket and hiking boots. The same outfit described in Sarah Chen's missing person report. Her long black hair hung over her face and her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah Chen?" She looked up, and I saw her face for the first time in 6 months. It was definitely her. The same features from the missing person photos, the same delicate bone structure. But something was wrong. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils, but the entire eye, as if someone had filled them with ink. "You came back," she said, and her voice was the voice I'd been following, but now it sounded different. Older, layered, like multiple people speaking in perfect unison. "I knew you would. You're just like all the others." I took a step backward, my hand fumbling for my radio. "Unit 23 to base, I need immediate backup at..." The radio exploded in my hand. Not sparked or shorted out. Exploded. The plastic housing shattered like a grenade had gone off inside it, sending fragments of metal and electronics into my palm. Blood welled up between my fingers, and I could smell burned circuits and ozone. "The shadows told me you were coming," Sarah said, rising to her feet with movements that were too fluid, too graceful. "They whispered your name in the dark places between the trees. Robert Sullivan, the young ranger who thinks he can save everyone." The shadows hanging from the tree began to move, swirling and coalescing into darker shapes. As I watched in horror, they started to take form. The outlines of people, dozens of them, all reaching toward me with fingers made of pure darkness. "Sarah, this isn't you," I said, backing away as fast as I dared. "Something's wrong. You've been missing for 6 months. Your family's been looking for you." She laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Sarah Chen died the day she walked into this forest. I'm what grew in her place. I'm what feeds on the shadows of the lost and the lonely, the ones who wander too far from the light." The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. My breath came out in visible puffs and frost began forming on the black moss at my feet. The shadows hanging from the tree were writhing now, reaching toward me with increasing desperation. "I am older than this forest," she continued, her voice echoing from multiple directions at once. "I am the darkness between the stars, the shadow that follows you home, the thing that watches you sleep. The indigenous people knew my name once, before your kind came and forgot the old warnings. They called me Yamaska no Kage, the shadow that devours." I turned and ran. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Robert Sullivan's situation? Comment below. My boots pounded against the forest floor as I crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping across my face and tearing at my uniform. Behind me, I could hear laughter echoing through the trees. Not just Sarah's voice anymore, but dozens of voices, all laughing in perfect harmony. The shadows were following me. I could see them in my peripheral vision, dark shapes flowing between the trees like liquid night, keeping pace with my desperate sprint. They whispered as they moved, speaking in languages I didn't recognize, but somehow I understood their meaning. You cannot run from what you carry inside you. You cannot escape your own shadow. My lungs burned as I pushed through a wall of salmonberry bushes, thorns raking across my hands and face. Blood ran down my cheek, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The trail had to be somewhere ahead, but nothing looked familiar. The trees seemed taller now, more twisted, and the canopy overhead had grown so thick that I couldn't tell what time of day it was. I pulled out my GPS with shaking hands. The screen was blank. Dead. Impossible. I'd charged it that morning, tested it twice before leaving the truck. I slapped it against my palm, but the display remained black. A branch snapped behind me. Close. Too close. I spun around and saw her standing 20 feet away, no longer pretending to be the Sarah Chen from the missing person photos. Her face was shifting, features flowing like melted wax, and her body stretched and contracted as if it couldn't decide what shape it wanted to hold. The purple jacket hung in tatters from her elongating frame, and her fingers had grown into claws that dripped with something black and viscous. "Running only makes it sweeter," she said, her voice now a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from inside my own skull. "Fear is the best seasoning for a soul." I fumbled for my service weapon, a Glock 22 that suddenly felt like a toy in my hands. The metal was ice cold against my palm, and when I tried to draw it from the holster, my fingers were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. "Bullets won't help you here, little ranger," the thing wearing Sarah's face said. "This is my domain now. Here I make the rules." The shadows from the tree had caught up, surrounding me in a circle of writhing darkness. They reached toward me with fingers that weren't quite solid, and where they touched my skin, I felt a cold so intense it burned. The pain was incredible, like being stabbed with icicles made of pure malice. I screamed and fired 3 shots into the center of the shadow circle. The muzzle flashes lit up the forest for brief instants, revealing glimpses of things I wished I hadn't seen. Faces twisted in agony, hands reaching up from the earth, eyes that reflected the gunfire like mirrors made of pain. The bullets passed through the shadows harmlessly and thudded into tree trunks behind them. The creature that had been Sarah Chen laughed again, the sound now like nails on a chalkboard. "You still don't understand," she said, her form becoming more monstrous with each passing second. Her legs had elongated into spider-like appendages, and her torso was stretching upward, becoming impossibly tall and thin. "I don't just kill, little ranger. I collect. Every shadow that passes through my forest becomes part of me. Every soul that dies in fear feeds my power." She gestured toward the shadows surrounding me, and for the first time, I really looked at them. The dark shapes weren't random. They were people. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all trapped in an endless twilight between life and death. I could see their faces now, twisted in permanent expressions of terror and despair. And there, in the circle closest to me, I recognized someone. Jake Morrison, a veteran ranger who'd disappeared 3 years ago during a routine patrol. His shadow form turned toward me, mouth opening in a silent scream, and I saw the exact moment he recognized me too. "Jake?" I whispered, my gun hand falling to my side. "He was delicious," the Shadow Witch said, her voice now coming from everywhere at once. 20 years of experience, 20 years of courage and competence, all drained away in one beautiful night of terror. He lasted almost 6 hours before his mind broke completely. The temperature continued to drop. Ice was forming on my eyebrows, and my breath came in ragged clouds that dissipated too quickly, as if the air itself was being consumed by the darkness around me. "What do you want?" I managed to ask through chattering teeth. "What I've always wanted," she replied. "To feed, to grow stronger, to add more shadows to my collection. But you're special, Robert Sullivan. You have something the others didn't." "What?" "Hope." The word hit me like a physical blow. She was right. Despite everything I'd seen, despite the impossible horror surrounding me, some small part of me still believed I could save Sarah Chen. Still believed I could make it out of this forest alive and report what I'd found. Still believed in rescue and justice and the triumph of good over evil. That hope was exactly what she wanted to destroy. "Hope tastes the sweetest when it's crushed slowly," she continued, her monstrous form now towering above the trees. "I'm going to break you piece by piece, Ranger. I'm going to show you exactly what happened to every hiker who's disappeared in my forest over the past century. I'm going to make you watch as I drain the life from their shadows, over and over again, until you understand that there is no rescue coming, no backup, no escape." The shadows pressed closer, and I felt the first real touch of despair creeping into my heart. She was right. I was a rookie ranger, barely 18 months on the job, armed with nothing but a handgun and rapidly failing courage. What chance did I have against something that had been hunting in these woods since before my great-grandfather was born? But then I thought about Mrs. Chen's voice on the phone last night. The raw desperation, the mother's love that refused to give up even when everyone else had stopped looking. I thought about my own parents, who'd be devastated if I never made it home. I thought about all the other families who'd never gotten answers about their missing loved ones. And I thought about Sarah Chen, the real Sarah Chen, whose shadow was probably trapped somewhere in this nightmare, still fighting to escape. "You're wrong," I said, raising my gun again. "There's always hope." The Shadow Witch laughed. "Prove it." That's when I noticed something she'd missed. In my panic, I'd backed up against one of the massive Douglas firs, and my shoulders were pressed against its rough bark. But this tree wasn't dead like the others. I could feel life pulsing through its trunk, warm and strong and completely untouched by the witch's corruption. The indigenous people had known about her. They'd left warnings, but they'd also left protections. I pressed my palm against the tree's bark and felt something surge through me. Not power exactly, but knowledge. Images flashed through my mind. Ceremonies conducted in this forest centuries ago. Rituals designed to bind dark entities to specific locations, wards and protections woven into the very fabric of the woods. The Shadow Witch sensed the change immediately. Her laughter cut off and her monstrous form began to shrink back toward human proportions. "What are you doing?" she hissed. I didn't answer. I was too busy following the knowledge that was flowing into me from the ancient tree. The indigenous protections were still here, still active, but they'd been weakened by decades of neglect. They needed to be renewed, recharged with the one thing the Shadow Witch couldn't touch: genuine, selfless courage. I understood now why she'd chosen this clearing, this specific tree. It wasn't random. This was the heart of the ward system, the central anchor point for protections that had kept her contained for generations. She'd been slowly corrupting it, using the shadows of her victims to poison the spiritual barriers that held her. But I could fix it. The knowledge flooding my mind showed me how. The price was my life. "You can't," the witch said, reading my thoughts. "You're just a human. You don't have the power." "No," I agreed, pressing both palms against the tree now, feeling the ancient ward system responding to my touch. "But I have something better." I thought about Sarah Chen's mother crying on the phone, about Jake Morrison's family who'd never gotten closure, about all the people who'd disappeared in this forest over the decades, whose families still wondered what had happened to them. "I have a choice," I said. The tree's bark began to glow with a soft, warm light that made the shadows recoil. The witch shrieked and lunged toward me, her form shifting back into something monstrous and spider-like. Claws extended to tear my throat out. She never reached me. The light from the tree expanded outward in a wave that washed over the entire clearing. Where it touched the trapped shadows, they didn't disappear. They were freed. One by one, the dark forms began to take on human shape again, their faces relaxing from expressions of terror into something like peace. Jake Morrison's shadow looked at me one last time and mouthed 2 words: "Thank you." Then he faded away, not into darkness, but into a gentle light that carried him somewhere beyond the witch's reach. The Shadow Witch herself was caught in the expanding wave of cleansing light. Her monstrous form began to unravel, pieces of stolen darkness falling away like shed skin. "This isn't possible," she screamed. "I am eternal. I am—" "You're finished," I said. The light reached her, and she dissolved like smoke in a hurricane. Her screams echoed through the forest for several seconds, then cut off abruptly, leaving behind only the gentle whisper of wind through healthy trees. But I felt the price of the renewal taking its toll. The ward system was drawing on my life force to power itself, and I could feel my strength draining away with each passing second. My vision began to blur, and my legs gave out, dropping me to my knees beside the glowing tree. This was how it ended. I'd saved Sarah and all the others, but I wouldn't be going home to tell anyone about it except Robert. I looked up and saw her, the real Sarah Chen, no longer a shadow but fully human again, solid and alive. She knelt beside me, her face filled with concern. "How?" I whispered. "The witch kept me alive," she said. "She needed my body as an anchor point, a way to stay connected to the physical world. When you destroyed her, I came back." She looked around the clearing, which was now filled with normal forest sounds, birds singing, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing. "But you're hurt. We need to get you to a hospital. Can't move, I managed to say. She pulled out a cell phone. Apparently technology worked fine in the forest now that the witch was gone. I'm calling for emergency medical. Hold on, Robert. You saved me. Let me save you. As I lay there, bleeding and exhausted but alive, I heard the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Search and rescue, probably alerted when I'd missed my check-in time. Sarah held my hand and kept talking, telling me about her 6 months as a prisoner in the Shadow Realm, about watching helplessly as the witch used her face to lure other victims, about never giving up hope that someone would come for her. The last thing I remembered before the paramedics arrived was looking up through the tree canopy and seeing actual sunlight filtering down, warm and golden and completely free of shadows. 3 weeks later, I was back on duty with a commendation for heroism and a story I couldn't tell anyone who hadn't been there. The official report listed Sarah Chen as found alive after surviving in the wilderness for 6 months. The Shadow Witch was never mentioned, but I kept the piece of bark from that ancient Douglas fir in my wallet, and sometimes on quiet nights when I'm patrolling the forest alone, I can still feel its warmth against my chest. A reminder that some protections are stronger than any horror, and that hope really is the most powerful force in the universe. Even if it costs everything you have to prove it. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Sarah Chen during those 6 months. I read every single one. My name is Brandon Cooper, and at 6:47 a.m. my radio crackled with the call that would change my life forever. Unit 23, we have a code yellow missing hiker, Olympic National Forest, grid section 47 North. 22-year-old male, Anthony Rodriguez. Last contact yesterday 7:30 p.m. on the Hoh River Trail. Family just reported. You copy? I fumbled for my radio with coffee-stained fingers, nearly dropping it as dispatcher Janet's voice cut through the pre-dawn darkness of my ranger station. 3 weeks into my transfer from Yellowstone, and I was still getting used to the dense, moss-covered wilderness of Washington state. The Olympic Peninsula felt alien compared to the open valleys I knew by heart back in Wyoming. Copy that, Control. Unit 23 responding. ETA 20 minutes to trailhead. The taste of bitter station coffee turned metallic in my mouth as adrenaline kicked in. Missing hiker cases always hit me hard. Maybe because my own 8-year-old daughter Emma loved hiking with me back home. Every missing person report made me think of her bright smile disappearing into the wilderness. I grabbed my SAR pack, checking the contents out of habit. GPS unit, first aid kit, emergency shelter, water purification tablets, flares. My hands moved automatically through the gear check while my mind raced. October in Olympic meant temperatures dropping to the 30s overnight. If Anthony Rodriguez had been out there for 12 hours already, hypothermia was becoming a real threat. The drive to the Hoh River trailhead took exactly 18 minutes through winding forest roads thick with morning fog. Ancient Douglas firs loomed like cathedral pillars on both sides, their bark disappearing into gray mist that seemed to swallow my headlight beams. Something about this forest felt different from anywhere I'd worked before. Older somehow. More aware. GPS coordinates 47.8606 Degren, 123.348 Degron W marked the parking area where Anthony's blue Honda Civic sat alone, windows already beaded with condensation. I ran the plates to confirm Washington State registered to Maria Rodriguez, probably his mother. The car was locked. No signs of disturbance, hiking boots and water bottle visible on the passenger seat. My radio crackled. Unit 23, family contact info, Maria Rodriguez, mother called in report. Says Anthony went for sunset hike yesterday, expected back by 9 p.m. She's pretty upset, Cooper. I could hear the strain in Janet's voice. Missing person calls were hard on everyone. Copy that. I'm beginning trail search now. We'll report every 30 minutes. The Hoh River Trail stretched ahead into the mist, unmarked and primitive beyond the first mile. I'd studied the maps, but being new to this area meant I was working blind on the local terrain. That's the thing about being the outsider ranger. You don't know which sections flood during storms, which game trails lead nowhere, which areas the locals avoid after dark. I should have asked why the locals avoid certain areas after dark. My boots crunched on wet gravel and fallen pine needles as I started up the trail, breath visible in the cold morning air. The forest was eerily quiet. No bird songs, no squirrel chatter, just the distant sound of running water and my own labored breathing as the trail climbed steadily upward. 20 minutes in, I found the first sign. Fresh boot prints in a muddy section, size 11 hiking boots heading deeper into the wilderness. My heart rate spiked with relief. At least I was on the right track. Control Unit 23, I've got fresh tracks, continuing north on Main Trail. But as I followed the prints, something started feeling wrong. The boot impressions were too clear, too perfectly preserved despite the overnight moisture. And they seemed to be the only human tracks on the entire trail, as if Anthony had been the only person to walk this path in weeks. 30 minutes deeper, the main trail forked. My GPS showed the official path continuing northeast toward Hoe Lake, but Anthony's boot prints veered left onto what looked like an unofficial game trail disappearing into thick underbrush. Every ranger instinct screamed at me not to leave the marked trail, but those boot prints were my only lead. The unofficial trail wound through increasingly dense forest, branches scratching at my uniform and catching on my pack. Spiderwebs heavy with dew stretched across the path at face level, suggesting no one had passed this way recently. But the boot prints continued, clear as daylight in the soft earth. That's when I heard it, a child crying somewhere ahead in the mist. High-pitched sobbing echoed through the trees, desperate and scared. My paternal instincts kicked in immediately. Some kid was lost out here, probably terrified and hypothermic. I quickened my pace, crashing through undergrowth toward the sound. Hey, hello, I'm a park ranger. Can you hear me? The crying stopped abruptly. Then, a small voice called back, "Help me, please, I can't find my mommy." I burst through a thicket of vine maple and found myself in a small clearing. In the center stood a little girl, maybe 6 years old, wearing a pink jacket and muddy jeans. Her dark hair was tangled with leaves, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. She looked exactly like my Emma from behind. "Hey there, sweetheart," I said, dropping to one knee and speaking in my gentlest voice. "I'm Ranger Cooper. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, lower lip trembling. "I got lost. I was looking for my brother. Have you seen him? He's wearing a blue shirt." Something cold crawled up my spine. A blue shirt. Anthony Rodriguez had been wearing a blue hiking shirt according to the missing person report. "What's your brother's name, honey?" "Tony," she whispered. "Tony Rodriguez. He told me to wait here while he went to find help, but that was a long time ago. I'm so scared." My radio felt like ice against my palm as I keyed it up. "Control, Unit 23. I found a child. Appears to be related to our missing hiker. Request immediate SAR backup and medical support at..." I checked my GPS, but the screen showed nothing but static. "Damn it." "Bad word," the little girl said, but she was smiling now. It wasn't a happy smile. Tony said the same thing when he found us. Us? I looked around the clearing more carefully. That's when I saw them. 3 more children standing at the edge of the tree line, silent as statues. A boy about 10 in a torn red shirt. Twin girls who couldn't be more than 5 holding hands. All of them staring at me with dark eyes that seemed too old for their faces. "My brother found us yesterday," the first girl continued in that same sweet voice. "We told him about the special place where our family lives. He wanted to see it. Don't you want to see it too, Ranger Cooper?" Every survival instinct I'd developed in 15 years of wilderness work was screaming warnings. Children don't survive overnight in October temperatures. These kids should be hypothermic, should be panicked, should be anything except standing here smiling at me like this was all some game. "Where exactly is this special place?" I asked, hand moving instinctively toward the bear spray on my belt. The boy in the red shirt pointed deeper into the forest. "Not far. Just follow the trail of pretty red flowers." I looked where he was pointing and felt my stomach drop. Leading away from the clearing was a path marked with what looked like red flower petals scattered on the ground. but in the morning light I could see they weren't petals at all. They were drops of blood, fresh blood. "Tony went first," one of the twins said in perfect unison with her sister. "He screamed a lot at first, but now he's quiet. Now he's ready for the ceremony." I was backpedaling before my conscious mind caught up with my body's panic response. These weren't lost children. They weren't children at all. Their skin had a waxy, unnatural pallor, and when they smiled, their teeth were too sharp, too white. "Don't run, Ranger Cooper," the first girl said, and her voice carried an authority no 6-year-old should possess. "The masters are hungry, and you look so strong, so healthy." Tony was healthy too before we fixed him. I turned and ran. Branches whipped across my face as I crashed through the underbrush, following my own broken trail back toward the main path. Behind me, I could hear the children laughing, a sound like wind chimes made of bone. My radio was dead, GPS still showing static, and my compass needle spun wildly as if something was interfering with the magnetic field. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Brandon's situation? Comment below. I burst back onto the main trail, lungs burning, and kept running toward the trailhead. But something was wrong. The trail looked different, older, more overgrown, as if it hadn't been maintained in decades. The wooden trail markers I'd passed on the way in were gone, replaced by crude stone cairns stacked in unnatural formations. My watch read 9:47 a.m., but the light filtering through the canopy looked like late afternoon. How long had I been in that clearing? It felt like minutes, but the sun's position suggested hours had passed. That's when I saw Anthony Rodriguez. He was hanging from a Douglas fir 20 feet off the trail, suspended by thick ropes around his wrists. His blue hiking shirt was shredded and soaked with blood that dripped steadily onto the ferns below. His face was wrong, stretched and distorted as if something had been trying to pull it apart from the inside. But the worst part was that he was still alive. His eyes tracked to me as I approached, mouth working soundlessly. The bottom half of his jaw had been removed, and I could see down into his throat where something black and writhing moved in the darkness. His chest rose and fell in rapid, panicked breaths. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, fumbling for my knife to cut him down. "He can't help you here," a voice said behind me. I spun around to find an elderly man in tattered ranger uniform, his face a patchwork of scar tissue and missing flesh. His name tag read Hendricks, and his uniform style looked decades out of date. "I tried to warn them," Hendricks continued, gesturing toward Anthony's suspended form. "Tried to keep people away, but they keep coming. The children are so convincing, aren't they? So innocent looking. Who are they?" My voice came out as a croak. "The lost ones. Disappeared in 1987 during the cult raids. Sheriff's department thought they'd arrested everyone, but the children had already been changed, blessed by their dark masters. They've been hunting here ever since, bringing fresh meat for the ceremonies." Anthony made a wet, choking sound above us. Something long and segmented was emerging from his throat, a centipede the size of a snake, its chitinous body glistening with blood and saliva. "The transformation takes hours," Hendricks explained conversationally. "They keep them alive for as long as possible. The masters feed on the fear, you see. The hopelessness. Young Anthony here will birth 12 more before he dies." I bent over and vomited coffee and bile onto the trail. When I straightened up, wiping my mouth with a shaking hand, the children had returned. All 4 of them stood in a semicircle around us, no longer bothering to look innocent. Their faces had elongated, jaws unhinging like snakes to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. Their fingers had grown into claws that scraped against each other with metallic sounds. "Ranger Hendricks tried to stop us once," the girl in pink said, her voice now a guttural growl. "Look how well that worked out for him." I looked more closely at Hendricks and realized his scar tissue wasn't from burns or accidents. Something had systematically flayed strips of skin from his face and arms, leaving patterns that looked almost ritualistic. His eyes were milky white with cataracts, but tears of blood leaked from the corners. "Run," he whispered. "I'll try to slow them down." The children things laughed in unison as Hendricks pulled a rusty machete from his belt and charged toward them. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, crashing through the forest with no regard for stealth or caution. Behind me, I heard Hendricks screaming, not in pain, but in rage. Metal clashed against something that sounded like breaking bones. Then silence. The trail ahead forked again, but this time both paths looked wrong. One led uphill toward what looked like an old wooden church, its steeple crooked and rotting. The other descended toward a grove where dozens of children stood waiting, their faces all wrong, their arms too long. I chose a third option and went straight through the underbrush, using my compass to head due south toward where the parking area should be. But the needle kept spinning and every direction looked the same, endless forest stretching in all directions. My radio squawked with static, then a familiar voice. "Daddy? Daddy, where are you?" Emma, my daughter's voice, scared and crying. But Emma was 3,000 miles away in Cody, Wyoming, safe with her mother. "Emma?" I keyed the radio. "Emma, honey, is that you?" "I'm lost, Daddy. I followed the nice children like you taught me, but now I can't find my way back. There are scary men here, Daddy. They have knives and they're singing songs about making me pretty like them." My heart stopped. This was impossible. Emma was in school. Emma was safe, but her voice sounded so real, so terrified. "Where are you, sweetheart? Daddy's coming to get you." "I don't know. There's a big wooden cross and lots of candles. The men in black robes are getting closer, Daddy. They say they want to play games with me. Please hurry." I was running again before I realized it, crashing through the forest toward the church I'd seen earlier. This was a trap. Had to be a trap. But if there was even a chance Emma was really here somehow. The church sat in a clearing filled with stumps that looked like they'd been cut with crude tools. The building itself looked like it had been constructed from salvaged materials. Barnwood, sheet metal, pieces of old cars. Painted symbols covered every surface, sigils that hurt to look at directly. The front door stood open, revealing flickering candlelight within. "Emma," I called out. "Emma, Daddy's here." "In here, Daddy. Hurry." I pushed through the door and immediately wished I hadn't. The interior of the church was a charnel house. Human bones formed intricate patterns on the walls, dozens of candles burned in skulls arranged on makeshift altars. And suspended from the ceiling by ropes and chains were bodies in various stages of decomposition, all of them wearing hiking clothes, all of them missing pieces. At the far end, near what had once been an altar, Emma sat tied to a wooden chair. Except it wasn't Emma. It was the girl in pink from the forest, wearing Emma's favorite purple jacket and her little hiking boots. But her face was wrong, features stretched and blurred like a photograph that had been damaged by water. "Hello, Daddy," she said in Emma's voice. "Aren't you going to give me a hug?" Around the edges of the church, figures in black robes emerged from the shadows. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods, but I could see pale hands that ended in claws, and the wet sound of their breathing suggested mouths full of too many teeth. "Welcome, Ranger Cooper," one of them said in a voice like grinding glass. "We've been waiting for you. The Lost Ones spoke so highly of your dedication, your willingness to risk everything for those you love." "Where's Anthony Rodriguez?" I demanded, though my voice shook. "Anthony has been blessed. He joins our congregation now, singing eternal praises to our dark masters. Would you like to see him?" One of the robed figures gestured toward the altar, and Anthony stumbled forward from the shadows. He was walking, but wrong. Joints bending in directions they shouldn't, head tilted at an angle that should have snapped his neck. The things that had emerged from his throat had left his face a ruin of torn flesh and exposed bone. When he opened his mouth, dozens of centipede legs emerged instead of a tongue. "He wants to tell you how grateful he is," the lead cultist continued, "how the pain was worth it for the enlightenment he's received. Don't you want that same blessing, Ranger Cooper?" I was backing toward the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The fake Emma giggled. "Don't be scared, Daddy. It only hurts for a little while. Then you get to play with us forever and ever. That's when I snapped. 15 years of wilderness survival training kicked in. These things had taken an innocent man and tortured him into something obscene. They were using my daughter's image, her voice, to torment me. And they thought I was going to just stand here and let them do it. I pulled my bear spray and emptied the entire canister into the faces of the nearest cultists. They screamed, a sound like steam escaping from a boiler, and clawed at their eyes. I used the distraction to grab a burning skull candle and hurl it at the fake Emma. She shrieked as her stolen clothes caught fire, her borrowed face melting like wax to reveal something insectoid underneath. The other cultists rushed toward me, but I was already moving, grabbing another candle and setting fire to the bone decorations on the walls. The old wood caught quickly. Within seconds, the entire church was ablaze. "You cannot destroy us," the lead cultist howled. "We are eternal. We are—" His words cut off as a burning beam crashed down on top of him, pinning him to the floor. The thing that had been Anthony Rodriguez stumbled in circles, the fire consuming the parasites that had taken up residence in his body. I kicked out one of the windows and dove through, landing hard on the ground outside. The church burned behind me like a signal fire, smoke rising into the gray sky. But I wasn't safe yet. The children things were waiting for me at the edge of the clearing, their forms flickering between innocent kids and the monsters they really were. "You think fire will stop us?" the girl in pink asked, her voice doubled and echoing. "We've been dead for 30 years. Fire is just another kind of cold." They advanced on me in formation, claws extended, jaws unhinged. I looked around desperately for a weapon and spotted a piece of rebar from the church construction. Better than nothing. That's when Ranger Hendricks appeared behind them, machete raised. Half his face was gone, revealing the skull beneath, but he was still fighting. "The old trail," he shouted. "Follow the creek south. It leads to blessed ground." He swung his machete in a wide arc, forcing the creatures back. I didn't wait to see how long he could hold them off. I ran toward the sound of running water, crashing through underbrush until I found a small creek cutting through the forest. The water was ice cold against my boots as I splashed downstream, following its winding course through increasingly familiar-looking terrain. Behind me, I could hear howling. Not human, not animal, but something between. The creek led to a small waterfall, and beyond that I could see a flash of color through the trees. Blue metal. Anthony's Honda Civic. I'd found the parking area. I scrambled up the embankment and ran for my Ranger truck, fumbling for my keys with numb fingers. The engine turned over on the second try, and I gunned it down the forest road without looking back. My radio finally crackled to life as I reached the main highway. "Unit 23, this is Control. What's your status? You've been radio silent for 6 hours. 6 hours. It felt like 6 days. Control, this is Unit 23. I found Anthony Rodriguez. He's dead. I need to report a homicide. Multiple homicides. And I need backup at the Hoh River trailhead. Lots of backup." "Copy that, Unit 23. State Patrol and Coroner are en route. Are you injured?" I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. My face was streaked with soot and blood, my uniform torn and muddy. There were scratches on my arms that I didn't remember getting, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Negative, Control. I'm okay." But I wasn't okay, and I never would be again. When the state police arrived 2 hours later, they found the church burned to the ground and no bodies inside. The official report stated that Anthony Rodriguez had fallen victim to an unknown animal attack, possibly a bear or cougar. His remains were found scattered over a half-mile area, consistent with predator activity. There was no mention of children in my official statement. Who would believe it? They transferred me to a different district the following week. Administrative reshuffling, they called it. But I knew the truth. Someone higher up knew about the lost ones, about what really happened in the deep woods of Olympic National Forest, and they wanted it kept quiet. I never worked another missing person case. Every time I got a SAR call, I'd think about those children's faces, about Anthony Rodriguez hanging from that tree, about the fake Emma sitting in that burning church. I'd think about how the monsters wear innocent faces to lure their prey. 3 months later, I put in for early retirement. I moved back to Wyoming close to my daughter and took a job doing fire safety inspections for the local school district. Safe, indoor work, where the only monsters are fire hazards and broken sprinkler systems. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear children crying in the woods behind my house. And sometimes when Emma's playing in the backyard, I catch glimpses of other children watching from the tree line. Children with too pale skin and too sharp smiles. The lost ones are still out there, somewhere in the deep forest, still hunting, still calling for help in voices sweet and innocent, still hungry. Anthony Rodriguez's family never got closure. His body was returned to them in a sealed casket, and they were told the attack was so severe that viewing wasn't recommended. His mother still calls the ranger station sometimes, asking if there are any new leads. I hear Janet still takes those calls, still tells Mrs. Rodriguez that the case remains open, but some cases should stay closed. Some doors should never be opened, and some children should never be trusted, no matter how lost they seem. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Anthony Rodriguez. I read every single one.